bunch of verbiage on the whiteboard here. And right up here we have the United States of America, upper lowercase. The is part of the proper name. Okay? Pay attention to that fact. This is our government in international jurisdiction. An international jurisdiction, as you will recall, is where the bar is. That's where land meets sea. Okay? We hold the land. The sea, not so much. Okay? The sea is partially delegated. The sea is partially delegated because of the enumeration of powers. See, our forefathers very specifically enumerated which powers they were entrusting to these foreign governments to do for them. Okay? It would be like me hiring an IT company to do IT for me. Okay? What happened was that at the end of the Revolutionary War, Britain was building up its industrial capacity. So they had all these factories that were either started or getting started. And they had a great need for raw materials like our cotton, our timber. Okay? We had a huge commercial fleet that were, ships that were designed to haul goods all over the place, but they were not Navy. We didn't have a significant Navy to protect our commercial shipping on the high seas. Okay, so part of the deal that settled the Revolutionary War, what is properly called the War of Independence, was a quid pro quo and the deal with the British monarch. And what we did was we said, okay, you've got a Navy, we've got goods, you want our goods, and we want to sell our goods because we don't sell our goods, we're going to starve over here, okay? So they cut a deal. The British monarch became our trustee on the high seas and navigable inland waterways. And as a result, as a matter of trust, the British monarch gained control of our Navy through the British Commonwealth, British territorial government, and also our Marine Corps on the high seas and navigable inland waterways. But on the land, the Marine Corps is ours. Okay? And in port, the Navy is ours. Okay? It doesn't come under control of the British monarch until it hits the high seas. Okay? So what I'm telling you is that when you're talking about the international sea jurisdiction, it's divided into delegated powers and non-delegated powers. The United States of America maintained all the land jurisdiction with one tiny exception. That tiny exception, you have to remember that this was back in the 1700s, and they were still hoping that they were going to find lots of gold in the unexplored Northwest Territories, okay? So one of the settlement items was that we would agree to pay a percentage of any gold that we found to the British king as tribute, okay? So a percentage of our gold was promised to the British monarch as tribute. But that is the only incursion onto our land or into our land minerals, into our land jurisdiction that the British monarch got out of the deal. Because our forefathers were very, very jealous of the land. They understood that controlling and owning and having land was the key to sovereignty and to safety and to national security and everything else. And so They were very jealous about the land and the soil. They didn't give up the soil, and they gave up very little of the land. And when it came to the sea, they were slightly more generous, as you can see. But they nonetheless enumerated strictly what powers were delegated. And so we have 19 enumerated powers. They're called powers, but they might as well have been called services. And I want to make something clear to everybody. There's our government, which is all on this side of the line, all in the actual world, and then there's their government, which is all on the other side of the line. So our government, you're dealing with people. Their government, you're dealing with persons. All right? The United States of America retained certain powers in the international jurisdiction of the sea. We didn't just give it all away to the Brits. Now, bear in mind, we didn't just give it away to the Brits. We gave it away on condition that they would uphold our national trust. And what can a trustee not do? A trustee cannot harm the beneficiary. Rule 1, a trustee can never ever harm a beneficiary. If they do, they're in breach of trust. And breach of trust is a serious crime. Okay? So we entrusted the British territorial government to provide us with essential government services. And we delegated some of our power on the high seas and navigable inland waterways to them. We also made a small delegation of power to the municipal government of Washington, D.C. But by far, the biggest delegation of power was to the states of America. Now, most of you have never really heard about or thought about the states of America. The states of America were the states of the Confederation. So we have the United States of America, an unincorporated federation of states. And who are the member states? Here you have Virginia, Minnesota, Vermont, Texas, California. That's our states. Okay, these are our land states. That federation was formed September 9th, 1776. Okay? Down here, operating in the realm of the sea, in the realm of persons, we have the States of America organization, and it was a confederation of states of states. Now here's where a big confusion comes about. These states of states are often called confederate states as opposed to federal states. And that creates a confusion because people think, oh, well, they're both states. But they're not states in the same sense. These states are actual, factual, physical borders defined as, you know, what we think of as states. Okay? These confederate states are business organizations. They are chartered by these states. Our states chartered states of states, federal states of states. So originally, what we had here was a confederation of states chartered March 1, 1781. And what they are supposed to be doing is serving us in international and global jurisdiction. Most of the powers delegated were delegated to these states, these Confederate states, and they were North and South. There was no distinction. These are the states that were formed under the Articles of Confederation. Okay? And I want you all to start thinking of them in terms of being on the other side of the bar, being in the airy-fairy realm of persons as opposed to people. And in that respect, being foreign with respect to our government, even though they were chartered by our states. Okay? So I'll just take a second here and I'll kind of write this out in a different way so we can see it a little better. And if you don't get one of these things, you know, it'll be available. It'll be on the film, and we'll go from there. So I want you to start thinking about the States of States organization that was formed under the Articles of Confederation. What are the members of that confederation? Well, okay, say that we have a state, Vermont. Vermont chartered right? Notice this, again, the is part of the name. That's the proper name of the thing that is being created here. This is a state of state. State of Vermont. What does the word of imply?
Out front.
From, belonging to, apart from, okay? So we have Vermont creating the state of Vermont, and this is a Confederate state. Most of us have been trained to think of a Confederate state as being a southern state. But no. All of these states are called Confederate states, all right? North and South. Now, originally, that was where this whole thing ended. We had a state called Vermont. We had the state of Vermont, and the state of Vermont was a member of the Confederation of States called the States of America, right? And these were the states that were operating in the international jurisdiction of the sea. These are the states that were operating in global jurisdiction for us. Okay?
In the actual Confederation is the only place you see, in quotations, the United States of America. They actually gave it that title, which is not lining up right now with what you're saying.
Okay. Question is, what's this about? We have the United States of America, just like this here, see? We have the United States of America. Okay. And then we have the United States. See what happened here? Here's the proper name of our international jurisdiction government, the United States of America, with capital T, upper lowercase, the is part of the name. It's a proper name in English, right? Down here, we have this other entity, which is the, in quotation marks. I put them in quotation marks to draw your attention to this. This is not part of the proper name, is it? Okay, so what do you got? All you got left is United States of America. What's that entity? This is the British territorial government. It's operating under our name because it's exercising our delegated power. But it's not us. Okay?
And they did that on purpose?
Yep.
That's just the tip of the iceberg, sugar.
So that is the British corporation.
Right, this is us. This is them. This is state people, right? This is United States citizens. People, persons. Okay?
Does that also relate to the difference between international trade and international commerce?
Right. This is international trade jurisdiction. We're going to get to international commerce. Now, what's international trade? Well, let's go back over here. Notice where I'm standing. Okay? You can conduct international trade as a state national, right? You can make a deal with somebody from France. You can, you can have your little trade back and forth. Or, as a state, as say California, I can conduct international trade with Vermont, or Texas, or France, right? This is a realm of international trade. But when you cross over that line and you're in the airy-fairy world, what? It's commerce. And what is it in commerce? Then you're dealing exclusively with incorporated entities. Commerce does not exist apart from incorporated chartered entities. All right? But in the realm of international trade, you can have people interacting with other people and making trade deals, right? So we naturally function in international trade, both as ourselves, as living beings, and our country, our nations interact in international trade. I want to draw something else to your attention that is very important. In the Constitution, we have the Interstate Commerce Clause. And the constitutions deal entirely on the other side of the bar, in the airy-fairy world, okay? So what's going on? Interstate, for the purposes of our country, is completely synonymous with international trade. So interstate commerce is business carried on between corporations across state lines. So if I go from Texas to California and I'm carrying on business back and forth, I'm engaged in what? International trade, which can also be called interstate trade, but cannot be called interstate commerce properly because what?
You're not incorporated.
I'm not incorporated, am I? And I'm not functioning as a corporation. I'm not chartered by any corporation. God chartered me sometime in October of 1955. Okay? So that's a distinction that you kind of have to be aware of as we get a little bit farther along here. Anyway, so we have the territorial government functioning under our name. And that's where a lot of confusion arises. Because people see the name United States of America, and they automatically think, oh, well, that's America, right? But it's not. It's the territorial U.S. And you're going to see the same exact thing go on with municipal government and the United States. But for just a moment, I want to go back here. This member of the Confederation of States ceased functioning at the end of the Civil War. What happened? Southern states were ruined. They were under the boot of Sherman's army. All right? What happened to the Northern Confederate States? They were all Confederate states, right? It was bankrupt. So poof, all of these states, the state of Vermont, the state of California, the state of Wisconsin, ceased to function. All of them, south and north. So all of the Confederation states collapsed at about the same time. Okay? So if you were paying attention earlier today, you know that on the airy-fairy side of the world, the structure of it went like this. Or rather, here, just a second. The proper name of the Confederation was States of America. Right? The members of States of America were the capital T Confederate States, North and South. This entity was the primary contractor providing us with the services enumerated in the Constitution. It ceased to exist in the 1860s. What happened then? The military government that was existing under the British territorial Commonwealth government came in and said, oh, there's an emergency. Nobody's manning the ship. What are we going to do? The whole wide open area of the sea and the global jurisdiction was wide open. Nobody was minding the shop. So what happened? They declared an emergency. What's an emergency? Okay, there's no provision for an emergency in any of our constitutions. There are no emergency powers. There's nothing there, folks. You can read the constitutions, all three of them, and there are three. You can read all three constitutions until the cows come home, and you will never see a reference to an emergency power granted to any subcontractor. And that's what these people are. That's what the persons are. They're all subcontractors. The States of America was a subcontractor of the United States of America, our international government, right? And so was the British territorial government, a subcontractor of the United States of America. And also, I will add, so was the United States municipal government, a subcontractor of the United States of America. And guess what? If you go back to an 1824 version of Webster's Dictionary, you will find that the word federal is a synonym for contract. Okay, so the federal government is a government under contract to our government to provide us with what? 19 enumerated, stipulated services, no more, no less. And that's what they're supposed to be providing us with. And it's supposed to be structured, as I'm showing you here, with the States of America organization doing the primary amount of the services. The British territorial government doing business under our name as the United States of America. Sorry. Okay, that's an S.
That's capital.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
EDA.
It's right below you.
Yeah. My bad. That is, it looks just like the United States of America, our states of America, except for the law, okay? They're doing business under our name. And they're doing the military side of it on the high seas, navigable inland waterways, right? Navy. USNC, right? When they're on the high seas, navigable inland waterways. Plus, down here, we have the municipal United States. You got the municipal United States, that's another subcontractor, right? What were they providing us? Postal Service. All right? Everybody good with that? So here's our contract government, our federal government. And absolutely all of it is on the other side of the line in the airy-fairy world of the sea and the air, right? And these guys, the municipal United States government, they're doing business under our auspices too, right? So they are doing business as DDA, doing business as the, guess what? Wait for it, United States. So we have one foreign government doing business as the United States of America because they're operating under our delegated power. And we have another foreign business that's doing business under our name as the United States. And do you blame anybody for being confused?
Not at all.
Do you perhaps suspect that maybe this was a setup?
I'm thinking so.
Okay? You have to be pretty sharp. You have to know your English grammar pretty well to recognize the difference between the proper name and the appellation that they use as an indeterminate entity doing business under our names. To begin with, these were all unincorporated businesses. This British territorial entity was not incorporated to begin with, and neither was the municipal entity. They were just businesses like a family business might be. They were larger by far, but they were corporate. They were not incorporated when all this started. Now that you can see this, you understand what a big blow it was for the states of America to stop functioning. Absolutely, all those other enumerated powers that were supposed to be operated by the states of America were now up for grabs, along with all the very juicy federal contracts that naturally belong to the states of America, right? Think about this in terms of business. You're just this little subsidiary contractor with your strictly defined services that you can get paid for down here. You know, you've got very strictly defined services of the Navy and the Marine Corps, and you've got strictly defined services of the Postal Services, and that's all you've got out of all of the governmental services to be provided. So all of a sudden, everything else opens up in front of you. We've got an OMG moment here. You know, the king and the pope think, hey brother, we got our end now, we're gonna go for it. And that's what they did. That is absolutely what they did.
To quote Dave from yesterday, it sounds like an SMU moment.
Yeah, right.
I was
just thinking that this is an SMU moment. Because everything else is just SMU.
Okay.
Shite made up.
So, what happens? They declare an emergency, and they use that as their excuse for the next move. Okay? The next move is to take over the organizations that had been operating within our states as our states of states. Remember, the actual federal state of Vermont that was chartered by Vermont? This Northern Confederate state? It vanished in the wake of the Civil War, and it was secretively replaced by guess what? Now, if you were sharp, if you knew your grammar, if you knew the quid pro quo of the territorial government, you knew how their name was being presented and why, then you could recognize the fact that this state of Vermont was a territorial state of Vermont. It was chartered under the British Commonwealth government, okay? This is all happening in the 1860s.
The land of Lincoln.
Later, we're going to get to the United States getting in the act. In the United States, when it's spelled like this, with the small THE, what does that mean? It's the municipal government. Right? They're going to foist off another version of this. The state of Vermont in all capital letters that you're all so familiar with.
Where we ever.
So, you've got two federal subcontractors, and they basically usurped upon our government using the excuse that there's an emergency. And the emergency is that we've never reconstructed our States of America organization. States of America has been missing in action and under reconstruction since 1863. And whoever told you that in school? If you're lucky, you took a dead boring United States history class and they had a 1 day, 10-minute mention of the Reconstruction after the Civil War. And nobody, I will guarantee you, nobody told you what a Civil War was, did they? I don't know, I was one of those kids sitting in the back row going, let's see if I can make this package of M&Ms last through the end of this hour. You know, I don't know about you, but the dead boringest classes that I ever had were United States history. Is this boring now? Are you beginning to get a little excited? All right. Now that you're beginning to see how you've been hooked, beguiled, defrauded, how they surreptitiously and secretively substituted their government franchises for our government franchises and usurped power against us while working for us, supposedly. You can see the depth of the breach of trust here. Because both the Pope and the British monarch did this. And they never told us. They never said one word. They didn't tell our great-grandparents what was going on. So, what's the one thing you can't correct? A problem that you don't know exists. Okay? So now you know how that went, and you know who's who.
I have a question. skip way ahead. Revelation 18 says, "For no man buyeth their merchandise anymore." And Babylon falls. It names 28 things that they sold, the jewels and the gold and the silks and all, and it's all wiped out. So does that mean that this false government is definitely, if we do right, destined to fall?
Let's go back in history a bit here. It's not so much going forward, it's going back. And this is important, and it's information that I don't know, for whatever reason, people don't have, okay? Our government is a melding of two completely different forms of government from the ancient world. Roman, and Hebrew. Okay? And this goes back to the irony of lawyers not knowing that law comes from God or because of God. Okay? Over here in the Roman system, we have what? Patriarchy. Over here on the Hebrew side, you've got what? Matriarchy. Now, if you're familiar with how the Hebrew civilization worked, you know that property, land assets, all were passed down through the mother's side. Okay? So our land jurisdiction is under what? The jurisdiction of a Republican state. And if you know any Latin, you know that little suffix there, Republican, makes it feminine. Okay? Over here, see there, guess what? Republic. Okay? A lot of people wandering around talking about the Republic, the Republic, the Republic, the Republic. That's them. That's the federal government. Right? Because we're living in Republican states. We're land jurisdiction. We're soil jurisdiction. We are in Republican states, and they are in a republic. They are functioning under a patriarchy, and we are functioning under a matriarchy. Our inheritance comes through our mother on the land. And that's why they've fought so hard and put up this entire fraud of having our mothers disinherit us as bastards.
why the Native Americans believe in Mother Earth.
Okay? So your inheritance as an American comes through your mother, not through your father. Everybody got that? And there is a very interesting thing that goes on here. Nomenclature is the science of naming things, okay? And as you can see, names are very important because that's what you use to identify something, right? So the entire science of nomenclature, whether you're talking about the British territorial entity functioning as the United States of America, or you're talking about the American international government, depends on the nomenclature. And as you've seen, just a tiny difference, like the difference between capital T, small h, small e, and all small letters of the, whether the is part of a name or not, can make a huge, huge difference. So you have to really very carefully look at what you're seeing there on the page and how things are named. Nomenclature. The Romans have a system of nomenclature which is exactly different, even opposite to what we have. In Latin, in ancient Latin, my name, as it currently exists, would be written see that? All small letters and connected by dashes to create one entity. That is my sovereign patrician name, such name as I may have. Okay? In Latin. If I go up a step, and it's written in upper and lowercase like that, guess what? I'm a bondsman. I'm an indentured servant. I'm a public official. Okay?
Next step on this way.
And if I write it in all capitals, like that, with dashes, guess what? I'm a slave. Literally. That is the Roman nomenclature. That is the Latin. What happens when I do this? I take all of the hyphens out. What happens? Then you've got gibberish. Then you've got what they call dog Latin, which is Latin for the ignorant. Okay? Because without those hyphens in there, this is what happens in Latin. gets split up into 3 different names. There's Anna, there's Maria, and there's something called Reisinger. We're talking about 3 people, 3 things. See, it doesn't make sense. Without the hyphens, it just doesn't hold together. And that's the problem with Latin. And it's also the opportunity of dog Latin. Dog Latin has been used since the time of the Emperor Justinian to bamboozle us all silly.
Anna, how does that tie in with Parsi syntax grammar?
Well, I need to talk to you a little bit about that. I spent 5 days with Russell J. Gould here in Texas, as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago. And he made some claims, and I decided to check them out. And what I determined was that this was yet another attempt to foist off the Justinian deception and dog Latin and all those related things on us again. And now I don't want you to get me wrong. I like Russell. I think he went through hell. But the whole thing with David Windmiller and Russell and parse syntax needs to be put into context, and it needs to be examined, because as you can see, we've been defrauded, bamboozled up one side and down the other for forever, right? Okay. So I gave him his 5 days, and I listened to everything he had to say, and then I went back and I objectively tested it out, and I looked at what he was doing. And no, it's not mathematically correct. It is objectively not. I'm a mathematician. I can show you why. Fundamentally, his parse syntax can't tell the difference between a pickle and a cucumber. Literally. So, I mean, that's a pretty big difference, right? If it's mathematically correct, it has to be able to tell the difference between a pickle and a cucumber. I'm sorry. So, the mathematically correct claim is bogus. And if you look at what they're doing with all this punctuation stuff, they're just creating another form of dog Latin. So, for example, I've been going around and teaching everybody to be using a name like this. And this is a bicameral name we're all familiar with, right? All they did was they took the middle name, which is strictly speaking improper, okay? They took the middle name, connected it to make one entity here. And one entity there, right? Because that full colon there makes a stop, right? When we went to the Vatican Chancery Court and demanded to know what all this naming, what the nomenclature was all about, guess what they told us? In their system, that's your business name. You have one name, that's your proper name. That name, supposedly, belongs to the government.
The last name, so John, I'm Wayne Daniel.
You're Wayne Daniel. This is your father's surname, your family name. Okay? They have a completely different system. And guess what?
That was the reason that through
studied the Chicago Style Manual, I put a period to end the sentence of our first name and our middle name, to separate it from the last name. The last name is not our name. We have no control over that. It goes right back to maximum law, that which one controls one, or creates one controls. Those were given to us. We have no control over that one. It's not our name. We should not even tell anyone our last name. We don't have to tell anyone our last name.
Well, that's their system. This is the Roman system. This does not have to do with us.
Right.
Our names, what's our official language?
English.
English. If it's not English, it's not ours. Sorry, that's not us. This is their Roman system. Okay, and why are they using a Roman system?
I'd like to know that too, because Oxford has I can only find two styles manuals. Chicago Styles Manual and Oxford Styles Manual. And they're both pretty much exactly the same.
Have you started seeing, I have, they've even, it probably has already been out there for a long time, but I'm starting to see they're using the last name, comma, first middle now on some new identifiers. I know.
That's your dead territorial name. Okay? Now, the question is, why are all these Roman things coming into play in the federal government? You know? Okay, here I'm going to show you. We have two foreign subcontractors, British territorial government and the Holy Roman Empire municipal government, okay? They're both under the Pope, okay? We're going to go into a little history. What's a commonwealth? Okay, a commonwealth is formed when the king granted land to the church for charitable purposes. The church was supposed to take that land and develop it to create community gardens, to create vineyards, to create orchards, woodlots, dairies, whatever the church could do with that land to make it profitable and turn a profit for its charitable work. Okay, that's a commonwealth. So what happens? The church takes the land from the king. They invest a bunch of money into developing it into apiaries or wineries or whatever it's suited for, right? And they take in paupers. Paupers, right? People who are indigent, incompetent, people who are too young, too old, too sick, too uneducated, mentally ill, whoever just cannot make it. The church brings them in, uses them as a slave workforce, an unpaid workforce, to develop this land. And they all live together in this very communal, communistic society within the church. And that's a commonwealth. It is a common sharing of wealth. Whatever they get out of this enterprise that they are working at, they share. Of course, it's all administered by the church, and the church retains control of who gets what out of this deal.
Right, same as our Commonwealth states.
Yes, right. So we have 4 Commonwealth states they have commonwealths within them. Okay, but they also have state structures, but they also have commonwealth structures within them. Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Massachusetts, and Virginia all have commonwealth government structures set up and operating within their state. Okay? Anyway, this is a commonwealth. And our federal contractor is a British Commonwealth government. Okay, so it's under the church. Through the king. Okay, it's a British Commonwealth, damn it. But it is a British Commonwealth.
Your last name, you're talking about the last name, people didn't have last names until William, at least the English, until William the Conqueror, was known as something else before he came over, decided, like Caesar Augustus, everyone must be taxed. And that's when English people got their last names.
Mhm.
It was John D. So-and-so of your father, or where you came from until that time.
Yeah, well, there was what they call the Domesday Book, the Doomsday Book. And they went through and they made these gigantic lists of every kind of property you can think of. I mean, they got right down to how many brown goats. And this was all going on after the Norman Conquest. The Norman Conquest is a pivotal moment in Western civilization's history that we hear nothing about in our schoolrooms again. What happened is that William of Normandy had a claim against the Central English kingdoms of Powys and Wales. And so he came forward and said, hey, I'm the rightful heir of those English kingdoms. And Edward the Confessor looked at all of the documentation and he said, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you have a rightful claim. It was agreed. And then Edward the Confessor died without really settling this matter. So the people who were there at his bedside said, we're not going to honor that. We're not going to let William of Normandy come in here and claim to be king. And so they chose their own king. And that understandably really disappointed and infuriated William of Normandy. And all of his kinsmen who were just across the English Channel in Normandy, which, you know, the Normandy Peninsula sticks out of France up there, right? So they polish up their battle armor, they wait for their moment. And the French conquered the English. Now, way back, they were still British too, which is how he got the claim in the first place, right? But that whole area, Normandy and England, back and forth, the royal families they were Frenchmen coming over to England, then they were Englishmen. You see?
They just married each other.
They married each other, and they were all members of the same family. They were all, you know, the basic same tribes. And guess what? America was named after Armorica. Armorica, which is a tribal entity, a French Celtic tribe that inhabits, to this day, a section of the Normandy coast. They were sailors. They were brilliant sailors. And so America was populated by, guess what? Armoricans. Forget this stuff about Amerigo Vespucci. That was just another little fanciful tale we were told.
It's us and you.
Like on stage?
Did you
Like on stage.
know that every president of the United States, down to at least the Bushes, who may not be who they're supposed to be, are cousins. They all come from the same planet Dex.
Yes, and you will see the same thing going out in directions to the west. You find it with the French and the English. And to the east, you find it with the Germans and the Russians.
I have a question. I've heard that the King of Spain owns a private company, which is the company collecting all of the tolls on Texas toll roads.
Quite possibly true.
It's a Spanish corporation, which means the king has a finger in it somehow.
Right.
So that's true.
So what we've got here, folks, if you really want to look at it, is a bunch of feudal kingdoms, we said no to feudalism. And so they just changed venue. So now we have corporate feudalism instead of land jurisdiction feudalism. Okay, it's the same evil. It has the same result. It enslaves people. And I'll tell you right now that each and every one of you, if you are functioning as a US citizen, you're paying more out of your wages and out of your livelihood and your substance than any serf ever dreamed of paying in the Middle Ages. A serf in the most oppressive kingdom during the Middle Ages paid an approximation of 25% of their substance to the king. You are all now paying somewhere between 60 and 65% of your substance to these rapacious foreign governments that have been rampaging around on our shores under what color of law? All right? Now, I promised I was going to show you exactly how this worked so that it all goes back to the Pope and to Rome and settle once and for all why I went to Rome and why I was working as a private attorney for Pope Benedict XVI. So these are the two foreign subcontractors we're talking about that are staging the federal government in the absence of our federal government. British Commonwealth Territorial Government, EBA, the United States, under our name, right, of America, and the municipal government, DBA, under our name, the United States, okay? This is what we're talking about now, from now on, until I tell you otherwise. All right, everybody got this straight now?
So how many times have you changed that in the last 25 years since I've done it?
What?
Just your presentation. We're constantly learning is what I'm trying to say.
Well, yeah, and we're getting better at presenting what we know,
Yeah.
right? Both of these
It's
entities
a lot of work.
are under the Pope. Does everybody see what I wrote there? British monarch of the Commonwealth.
What about the motu proprio and none of that?
We're not going to go there right now. British monarch of the Commonwealth. Who's the British monarch of the Commonwealth?
Queen.
all the descendants of King John, because King John was the British monarch of the Commonwealth. What happened was that King John fell out of favor with his father, William of Normandy, William the Conqueror. So in 1087 AD, when William died and the will was read, guess what? John got no land, none whatsoever. He was called John Lackland for that reason. That was his nickname. That was a joke. Okay, he was totally disinherited from the land. A whole bunch of Norman barons, they were barons in Normandy, owing fealty to William in Normandy, okay, became kings in their own right, and they got land in perpetuity in England as a reward for their service to William the Conqueror in the conquest. Okay? So, at the end of the day, when the will was read, all of these different people that came over with French names, the Deauvilles, the Earl of Loudon, the last Plantagenet, okay? These were all Frenchmen who came over to England and who received English land from William the Conqueror as part of their reward. So they became what is known as sovereigns in their own right. But William's own son, John, was disinherited and received no land from his father. So the Pope stepped in and said, hey, I've got land in England. I need somebody to help me deal with this situation. I have a royal warrant and a royal concession here. It's the Commonwealth. This is land. It's in England. You can manage this for me, John. And that's where things flipped from the British monarch employing the church to manage land for the monarch to the church employing the British monarch to manage the land for them.
And that was Westminster, right?
No, Westminster's something different. Westminster is a separate government again. That's another whole story, but no.
That's part of the point.
No, Westminster is managed by the Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayor, okay, and the Lords of the Admiralty, that's a separate government too. But anyway, let's just talk about this for a minute. So you have John, who's the king of the Commonwealth, which is basically the church estate, wherever the church estate may be. When I was a little kid, we had something known as the British Commonwealth, and it was huge. It included Canada. It included Australia. It included, we didn't know it, but it included the United States of America that was working for us. Okay? So this whole thing, the British Commonwealth territorial government doing business as the United States of America in our name, is controlled by the British monarch of the Commonwealth. To this day. And they're all descendants of King John.
Which explains why all these presidents have lineages like the John.
Right. Exactly. It's completely illogical. It is.
Did we get to call that that?
No, it's monarchy. It's patriarchal monarchy, where the oldest son, the oldest son, the oldest son, the oldest son is supposed to inherit, right? That's the Roman patriarchy, because this is all under who? The Pope. Because guess what? The British monarch of the Commonwealth works for the Pope. So that's how the territorial government is under the thumb of the Pope. The monarch is merely a property manager and administrator for the Pope and the Commonwealth. And over here, the municipal government was always under the auspices of the Holy Roman Empire, the secular side of the church, as they say. So this was always under the Pope too. So guess who I went to see? The Pope. Hey, you lousy subcontractor, what are you doing? You got people over here stealing our people, human trafficking them, press ganging them, conscripting them, claiming that there's an emergency, not telling our people what's going on, enslaving people. Don't you know that it's against the law to enslave people, has been worldwide since 1926? Hello. And the Pope is sitting there like, nobody told me. No, nobody told me.
That was his response?
Yes, literally. Nobody told me.
The granddaddy of all the deniability right there.
So who's pulling the Pope's strings?
Isn't that just a great question? Anyway, at the moment that, as David put it, there is a moment at which fraud is discovered, in which you cannot escape knowledge of the fraud, and you then have to oppose it or become an accomplice to it and be responsible for the crime. And that moment came for Pope Benedict XVI, when this was laid out in front of him and he couldn't get away from it. So he immediately turned around and he started taking action to correct, right? And he took a number of actions to try to correct the situation. He really did. And he turned to us and said, oh my, I've got to tell all my people that they're doing it wrong. In order to make correction, we have to give notice to all of these different governments and all these officials that are operating under false premises. I can't possibly do that all by myself. Because remember, now he's operating in his private capacity as just another human being, like human being, right? So we said, okay, we'll give notice. We'll help you give notice. We'll go explain this to the rest of the world. We'll tell all the government officials. We'll tell the military. But since this is all your operation, either through the Queen or directly, it would help if we were operating under your auspices. Okay. Who am I? Okay, you work for the Pope. And I'm just walking into your office and I'm telling you, you're doing it all wrong. I'm sorry. This isn't supposed to work this way. It's supposed to work that way. And so you're being called upon to make the correction. You paying attention to me? Hell no. You work for the Pope. So that's the position that the archbishops are in. So unless you come into their office and say, wait a minute, I'm operating as a private attorney for Pope Benedict XVI. Oh, okay, now I'm listening. Otherwise, I'm not listening. So that's why we're operating as private attorneys for the Pope. But at that point, the church itself was coming under attack by the bankers, because the church has sheltered all sorts of sinners, including pedophiles. And there was a direct correlation, let me tell you, between the time that Pope Benedict sided with us and the time that the church came under attack. I mean, you could almost lay it down on a line and say, okay, this is when the banks began the attack against the church. And it was the banks that brought the attack about the pedophiles and pedophilia and all of that. And of course, the banks knew about pedophilia because the bankers are the ones responsible for the pedophilia. See, the bankers belong to their own religion, if you can call it that.
And that's the red shoes.
Yeah, well, that's a whole bunch of different things that we all consider wrong if we're going according to the Bible. The Bible condemns many, many things. But, you know, there are certain things that it very obviously does condemn. It condemns sodomy. It condemns bestiality. It condemns sex with little kids. I mean, and that's the law we live under, right? But there's another pagan reality out there. There is a pagan theocracy out there that is based on the worship of Mammon, Asherah, Moloch, a whole pantheon of profane, foreign gods. And that is the religion of the bankers. And so, of course, the bankers had cause to know about all the pedophiles and all the sodomites in the church. Because guess what?
They funded it.
Right, they're the ones that knew, they're the ones that infiltrated, they're the ones that got this all set up so that they had leverage. They had blackmail material over the church. So when Pope Benedict XVI sided with us, made correction, started going pedal to the metal, what happens? He gets exposed as a homosexual. And he knew that would happen. But he did the right thing anyway. So when anybody wants to say something bad about Pope Benedict XVI,
He did so much good for everybody, and I'm not a Catholic,
right,
but he did so much good.
he did the right thing. When push came to shove, he risked his life, risked exposure of every sin he ever committed in his life, and stood up. But by then he was an old man. He was in his 80s, he was sick, he was tired, he was overwhelmed, he was threatened with death. And so he retired. Now the office of the Pope is a sacred office. That's the church. The office of the Roman Pontiff is not a sacred office. But the Pope always wore both hats ever since the Council of Nicaea. And this is where we get this demarcation between what we think of as the Christian church, the Catholic church, which is a moral person as identified in the canon law. Remember, they didn't say that the Roman Catholic Church was a moral person. They said that the Catholic Church was a moral person. So there's a split there between the sacred and the profane, between the office of the Pope and the office of the Pontiff. And this exposure, what we've all done with this, and you know, the explanation provided to Pope Benedict and all that came forth from that, resulted in the office of the Pontiff being dissolved in 2011. And the trust that underlies that, the Urban Trust, otherwise known as the City of Rome Trust, was liquidated. Now, the City of Rome Trust was one of the oldest trusts in the world. It dates back to what, 753 BC? Okay, so they started a City of Rome Trust back almost, what, 750 years before Christ, we're talking. And it was still operating in 2011.
So what was that worth?
Unimaginable amounts of money, assets, credit. And there's been a lot of games played with that. J.P. Morgan got involved, Jamie Dimon, and all those other crooks. And they were basically kind of formulating excuses again. Oh, there's an emergency.
Right.
Okay.
And is that, I'm sorry, is that the trust where all of the books from the Library of Alexandria wound up, that they say burned? Is it in that trust?
Not all the books burned, that's true.
That's what I'm saying.
But that's a whole different subject. The City of Rome Trust was the wealth of the city of Rome, the wealth of the empire. Okay? This is the home turf of the Roman Empire. And they guarded that and used that and profited from that generation under generation under generation. Okay? Anyway, I'm kind of getting off track here, but this is all to explain why the federal government that continued to exist after the Civil War was all under the Pope. Either under the Pope through the Queen or under the Pope through the Holy Roman Empire. Okay? And that's why the Pope is involved in all of this, the office of the Pope. Okay, everybody need to take a break. Say 15 minutes.
Hey, guys. Oh, you did.
I noticed.
Okay, guys, we got a long way to go and a short time to get there, okay? Question came up is why was the Confederacy styled as the United States of America, upper and lowercase, originally? You have to understand that during the War of Independence from 1776 until the adoption of the constitutions, it was everything that was going on in international or global jurisdiction was being handled by the United States of America, upper or lower case. Absolutely everything. All of those jurisdictions were being handled by the United States of America. So, at the Constitutional Convention, there was a power sharing that took place. The constitutions, all constitutions are dead agreements. That's all a constitution is. I mean, you can have a constitution of this and a constitution of that. Constitutions, by definition, and you can look this up for yourself, are debt agreements. And essentially what it is one party is contracting with another party for services. And they are agreeing to pay for those services. So when you look at the preamble of any of the three constitutions, you will see that we the people, and we learned who the people were, the capital P, the state citizens are the ones who are holding our end of that contract. It's our states, our physically defined states, and the people who are operating as state citizens, the people, who are holding our side of the federal contracts. That's why nobody else can enforce the Constitution. If we're not operating as state citizens, we're not parties to the Constitution. We cannot enforce them. So when we're not doing our job, guess what? There's nobody minding the hen house. There's nobody with the power to enforce the constitutions or claim guarantees or rights under the constitutions. Because they're claiming that our status is entirely different. They're saying that we're their citizens. Okay? So that's why when you go into a federal district court, and you're going to plead a tax case or something of that nature, the judge will sit there and he'll peer over his desk and he'll say, don't you mention the Constitution here. That has nothing to do with what we're doing here. If you mention the Constitution again, I'm going to hold you in contempt. And the average American walks in there and goes, what? What just happened there? I'm supposed to be protected. Well, you are supposed to be protected, but you're not being protected because you're being misidentified. Okay? Here's the deal.
We need to start paying for this, Sharon.
Okay? You got a state citizen of the United States. You have a United States citizen. And you've got a small case citizen of the United States. Both of these two, United States citizen and citizen of the United States, are defined in the constitutions. This one, state citizen of the, with a capital T-H-E, United States, is not defined in the constitutions because, why? We're not the subject of the constitutions. Constitutions don't talk about us hardly at all. We weren't initially mentioned much except Delaware, as David pointed out, added that all-important little phrase, we the people, so that we were identified as parties to the constitutions. And then, on top of it, 2 years later, they scratched their heads and they said, hey, we better get busy here. We can't leave this kind of dangling in the wind. We got to do something. We got to add a what? Bill of Rights. We have to be explicit. We have to at least get our toe in the door and say, well, this is what we really need. Okay? So why don't they mention us? Because these constitutional statuses that exist only because of the constitutions are the subject of the constitutions. These officers and corporate officials are subject to the constitutions. Remember that definition we had of a juridical person? What did it say? They were subject to a higher authority, and they had obligations and rights according to their nature. That came out of the common law. And what did I observe to you? That the federal code is what? It's canon law. And why does that make sense now? Because the Pope is in charge of both the territorial and municipal government. Federal code is canon law. And municipal law is all rules. It's all regulations and doctrines. Okay? So the constitutions don't talk much about us. But if you read the Constitution, you will see that it does define United States citizen and citizen of the United States. And if you go to the very first iteration of the immigration and naturalization laws, you'll find an extensive explanation of exactly what it takes for one of us to become one of them. And it required a very extensive process. You had to prove your character. I mean, you couldn't be any kind of a criminal. You had to be, have professional, you had to be able to make a living and have a reason to be in this status. You had to go through a public declaration and say, yeah, I want to be a United States citizen. Only the best and brightest were supposed to be United States citizens. People of the highest caliber were supposed to be United States citizens. And over here, we have the slaves. We have the sovereigns. We have the indentured servants. And we have the slaves.
I put something together a couple months ago, citizenship, citizen equals subject, subject equals slave, it's slave ship, right? Wordsmithing.
Well, look at it this way. You have to serve yourself, right? There has to be some way that we can interact with all the other people in the world. So we have to have some form of government, right?
Necessary.
A necessary evil. So when you step up and you decide to be a state citizen, what are your obligations and rights? Well, your obligation is to act as a fiduciary deputy for your state, to make sure that everything that goes on in your state government is right and proper. And to do all of the things, the duties, to be a member of the jury pool, to serve any public office in the state honorably and according to the prudent man standard, to obey the Ten Commandments, which are, the basic law of the soil in this country, to obey the public law, which includes the organic law, and it also includes the U.S. statutes at large. So that is where the pedal hits the metal for us as our citizenship obligation. And what do we get in return? We get our own ports, we get our own police forces, we get control of the land and the soil,
resources.
We get control of our resources. We get to say what happens to our resources. And we get to enforce the constitutions. Because the only people that are party to the constitutions are who? The state citizens. And why are the state citizens the only parties to the constitutions? Because they're the ones that are operating the state governments, right? I mean, it makes perfect sense, if you really step back and think about it, that it's organized the way it is. And that's why continental marshals have to be what? State citizens. Because otherwise they can't enforce the Constitution. It's the people with the capital P, we the people, who are party to the Constitution. And that's why you have to be a state citizen to enforce the Constitution. Does that make sense? So,
Anna, where did the little u and the capital U also play in? Remember, they were the small u, united, became an adjective.
that was when they did the power sharing out from the original Confederacy, which was operating under the name the United States of America. Okay, the holding company, the United States of America, was doing business as the United States of America throughout the latter part of the War of Independence and until the Constitutional Convention. And what happened at the Constitutional Convention was a power sharing, where certain enumerated powers, right, were distributed from the United States of America as the delegator to the states of America, to the British territorial government operating in our name as the United States of America, and to the municipal government operating as the United States. Okay? Some people are getting really confused about the whole business of
It's easy
citizenship.
to get confused, even for people that have been doing this a long time, because I'm trying to go through it with you, along with you. And, you know, the Cato Institute, what they've done is they go off the, I mean, they have checked every single letter, you know, period, everything. And in 1776, America's founders gathered in Philadelphia to draft the Declaration of Independence, which dissolved the political ties that had bound the American people to Great Britain. A new nation was thus formed, free and independent. The small letter, United, capital letter, States of America, capital, upper lowercase. So, and then when you go to the Declaration of Independence at the very top, it says the unanimous declaration of the 13 united, and united is small, states of America.
Small s.
Right. Yeah, it's a small u.
Mhm.
The 13 united, small United States of America.
Mhm. And they were formed from what? The United Colonies,
That's right.
right? So they began
The
operating.
Articles of Confederation.
Right, and that's why the Declaration of Independence is our founding document, and why everything that we do has to go back and adopt the Declaration of Independence. Because there is no government of America apart from that. It was the Declaration that is our founding document, period.
Our Constitution.
Everything else that came later is just, you know, ways of organizing government and defining government and parceling out different rights, powers, and obligations. It's the Declaration that makes us a country, that made us a country. And we, as people, operate by what? Declaration and decree. Declaration and decree. That's an important point. David was talking about this the other day, and I don't know how many people really caught it, but everybody goes into these courts and they motion the court to do something. Sovereigns don't motion the court to do anything. They give the court an order to move. That's the difference between me saying, oh, please, sir, would you please go over here and do this for me? And saying, go over there and do this. Okay?
I like what you're saying because they define a petitioner as a movement.
Right.
And that's an order, you said it's an order to move versus a motion, right? Just a request,
Right.
a begging of.
Yes, a pleading. That's why they say, where's your pleadings? Where's your briefs? They want you to plead to them, right? They want you down on your knees. Yeah, they want you down on your knees. That's why they ask you to plead.
Is that why it looks like a church with all the pews and they're in the middle?
You are in a chapel when you are in one of their courts because guess what? It's operated as a theocracy. And not necessarily a Christian theocracy. This municipal government is operated as a pagan theocracy. This territorial entity is operated as a Christian democracy. nothing to do with us. They're our subcontractors. We're supposed to be telling them what to do. And if we don't tell them what to do, guess what? They declare an emergency and they go running right out the barn doors. Anyway, this is why our continental marshals have to operate as state citizens so that they can enforce the Constitution.
And state national, where does that fit in?
State national is one of the people, the small p. Okay, they have no obligation to the government at all. They don't have to serve the government in any capacity except to keep the peace. That's it. So, for example, if you go home tonight, say you're a continental marshal, and all day long you've been in the field, and you've been functioning as a state citizen, and you've been holding feet first to the fire to respect the constitutional rights of people, okay? You take off your badge, you take off your shirt, you take off your 6-gun, you walk into your house, and guess what? You're a state national again. You have all the rights and protections of anybody else. And it's that quick. Okay?
And next morning it flips.
And next morning, when you get up and you put on your gun, you put on your badge, and you walk out that door, you're a state citizen again. Just like me, when I put on my judge's robes, and they're not black, by the way, but when I put on my judge's robes, I'm a state citizen. I'm obligated. I have to toe the line. I have to act as, and I put on my fiduciary office. Okay, well, now I'm a fiduciary. I have to act under the prudent man standard in behalf of all of you. So, what would a prudent man do with this situation? It's a pretty high standard. For example, I have to go out and I have to order audits of accounts. I have to be able to bring this forward to you. I'm responsible to you to say, okay, well, here's the situation we had. Here's what we did with it. And I did my best, sir, and I acted as prudently as I could, and I gave you the same service I'd give myself. Okay? That's a fiduciary office. Our Congress, the Congress that we're owed, all of the senators in our Congress act as fiduciary officers. All of our senators can be recalled by our state legislatures. If you've ever looked at what goes on in Washington today, you now know that their senators cannot be recalled. They get a 6-year free pass to do any damn thing they want. And we cannot recall them, we cannot discipline them, we cannot do a thing about it. They just run wild and spin, 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 spin. And you cannot even object. Because why? It's not our Congress.
Judge, I want to be a good state citizen, okay? And I'm not a marshal. And I went home at night, I took my clothes off and got in the house. And unfortunately, I turned on the TV. And something came on that TV that I know somebody's being abused in terms of their constitutional rights. I may not know a lot about them, but it looks pretty obvious to me. It's a living, breathing person. And, I surmise that their constitutional rights being violated. Can I put my clothes back on and go out and do something, or do I have to wait for orders, or who do I ask permission of, or how does this work?
Who are the only people who have constitutional rights? State citizens and state nationals.
And I was a national when I walked in the house. Okay?
Are you a registered voter unless you were acting as a public servant?
Right.
See, if you're a state national, when you act as a public servant, you're a state citizen.
Just a regular old guy.
Yeah.
I want to qualify for the citizen status of state.
How does he know that that's a state national that's being abused?
This is the problem.
Yep.
This is status declaration. You know, you can't assume that somebody is a state national just by looking at them. And that's why it's so important for us to declare our status. That's why it's so absolutely necessary.
The most important thing is that the first document you do, this is what I teach in all my classes, the very first document you do is your affidavit or repudiation of Secretary of State notified. They just say, hey, here's the list of definitions that we accept when you want to interact with us. Here's the definitions of statuses. Pick one. Just notify us. Let us know what it is. And then they have to treat us accordingly. And that's all they're asking for. So that's why that's the most important document to do, and you need to do it under the penalty of perjury, therefore an affidavit. That's the single most important thing you do. Then you can go get your passport, and so on.
Well, and you can also look at it this way. Once you take control of your identity and your status and your name, once you just, declare, and, like the Declaration of Independence, we operate under declarations, right? Okay, once you do that, then you can go forward and you can operate all of these franchises however you see fit. Once you domicile them on the land and soil jurisdiction that you are heir to, then you get to do what you want to do in all these other venues and jurisdictions. You're no longer under the thumb and forefinger administration of the British Territorial Trust, okay, or the Municipal Trust, right? Suddenly you are back to being who you always thought you were. Only now you're educated and you're able to function as an American, as a Wisconsinite, as a Texan, as California, as a Minnesotan. I have a lot of time. When we first got involved in this, I think you ought to know about the pitched battle that went on. There was a move on to incorporate us. First, we had a British territorial protectorate, and then we had a municipal protectorate, and then we had UN protectorate, okay? They just kept passing us around like a hot potato. And then the move was on to say that we had abandoned this continent. They said there is no United States of America anymore. There are no citizens in the states. There are no state citizens. We can't find them. We don't know where they are. They're gone. They disappeared. They never came home and finished the business of reconstruction. Okay? They don't exist anymore. Right? So they were making a claim on abandonment against our government. And they had proceeded pretty far down the path. And it was at that moment that a few of us raised our hands and said, wait a minute, the United States of America is still here. I beg your pardon. Queen, Pope, And all of this led up to a moment in November of 2015 when we reissued and re-upped our sovereign letters patent. And as you learned from Ron, what's important when it comes to land? Patents. We reissued the sovereign letters patent owed to the United States of America. We did it under our seals, and we gave notice to the Queen and the Pope and the Bank of International Settlements. And we said, hello, here we senators came back and said, oh, they don't even have a currency. And we said, I'm sorry, we still have 500 billion US silver dollars in circulation. It's more than enough for our purposes right now. When we get ready and tired of it, we'll issue more silver dollars, or we'll issue silver certificates, or gold certificates, or anything else we want to issue, because guess what? We're richer than Midas. We're richer than Kronos. We have so darn much money, folks, in terms of real assets, that it isn't even calculable. And guess who it belongs to?
Us.
The living people. Well, not just us, but
All sovereign nations.
all of these other countries have been subsumed into this same cesspool. Okay? They've all been commercialized. They've all been incorporated. They've all been paying for governmental services, right? From corporations that are in the business of providing governmental services. And they've suffered the same boom and bust sort of thing that we've seen. These corporations come in here, and what is the number one thing that everybody says, oh, you're crazy, right? Let me tell you something, a sovereign state can't go bankrupt. It's impossible. They're not eligible for bankruptcy protection. The sovereign state is what stands behind any bankrupt entity that it charters. So when you hear this stuff, oh, the United States is going bankrupt, you know right away they're not talking about the sovereign state. They're not talking about the people. They're talking about a corporation. And in this case, a foreign corporation that's going bankrupt, a service provider. That's like me hiring a lawn maintenance or property management organization to do work for me, and they go bankrupt. Does that bankrupt me? No. What happens? I have to find new service providers, or I have to provide the service myself, right? Okay, if my property manager goes out of business, retires, goes bankrupt, dies, whatever, what do? I go out and I shop around and I find a new property manager, don't I? If I have somebody that I hire to pick my crop, and for whatever reason my helpers, my harvest helpers that I hired last year can't help me this year, what do I have to do? I gotta go find other hired people. I have to go find other people to help with my harvest, right? And that's all that this is. All of this bankruptcy isn't about you. It isn't about me. It's about our hired help. Now we should be concerned because many of those people are living here with us. What happens to them affects us. You know, I'm great friends with my postmaster, my U.S. postmaster, okay? If he lost his job right now or lost his pension right now, it would have terrible effect on his family, and it would affect me because I wouldn't be getting the service, and my friend would be in deep distress. Okay, do I want that to happen to him? No. Do I want anything bad to happen to the guys that are out there at the Air Force Base at Elmendorf? Do I look crazy? Do I want anything to happen to our airmen and to our soldiers? No. I want them to be perfectly safe. I want them to be well fed. I want them to have the top care ever, okay? I want them to have everything that they need. Period. And there's no reason that they can't. Because as I just told you, we're all richer than Midas. We can afford to pay our servants, our public servants. But we have to man up, and we have to operate our government, and we have to bring forward our lawful claims, which supersede any legal claims. Okay? We have to gain control of our own assets again. And we have to make rational, prudent and decisions about how we're going to spend them. We have to take care of our own business. We have to self-govern. What a concept. And in order to do that, you have to declare your status. You have to take back what's yours in terms of who you are, what you are, and how you're functioning. You have to learn some history, like you heard today. And our Continental Marshals are coming on board. They're getting their status corrected. They're going to be operating out there as state citizens. And what happens when they are out there towing the line and saying, hey, where is their jurisdiction? Land jurisdiction. International land jurisdiction. Okay? So what kinds of crimes and problems occur in international land jurisdiction? International, interstate, remember? Banking fraud, securities fraud, human trafficking, drug running, alcohol running, firearms running, all of this stuff that goes on, that affects us. What else? What's the worst? I mean, there are many egregious instances, and David is deeply involved in correcting the crime of kidnapping children and abusing them, okay? Kidnapping is an international, interstate crime that the Continental Marshals will deal with. One of the most egregious cases of just plain old kidnapping and unlawful conversion takes place in our hospitals. The dead baby scam and the Vital Bureaus of Statistics and Health. Those operations have to be, if not shut down, extremely curtailed and brought under oversight. Because you see, we cannot keep the municipal government from registering its citizens, and we can't keep the territorial government from registering its citizens, but we can surely keep them from registering our citizens by mistake. And there's a line there that has to be held, which we can hold, and the Continental Marshals are there in that particular jurisdiction to do it, to prevent human trafficking, kidnapping, unlawful conversion, unlawful conscription. These are all things that the Continental Marshals hold that unique jurisdiction to do. And as for the rest of us, down home on the farm, who's our law enforcement? The sheriff, our county sheriff, elected among the state nationals and state citizens of our county.
The soil?
The soil jurisdiction, yes. And who is the highest peacekeeping officer in the land?
Sheriff.
County sheriff.
Your county sheriff. The county sheriff who is standing up and claiming his state citizenship and his state national status, who is elected by you, who are also claiming your state national status, right? Or your state citizenship, whichever, however capacity you're acting in, right? You get to elect your county sheriff where you live, and he is the highest elected peacekeeping official in the country. Nobody stands above a county sheriff on his turf. So that's why a county sheriff has a star that has no balls, no encirclement, nothing. It's just sharp points on his star. He is the top. He is the star that is on those stars. He is the star. That's what That's what he wears on his chest because he's the highest elected peacekeeping official in the country when it comes to the borders of his county. Okay?
What happens when the sheriff declares that the city of Austin a sanctuary city and they're on tape and they're corrupt? Not one.
I would have to look at the city of Austin to see whether it was functioning as a municipality or if it was functioning as a true city to give you an answer to that. But the point is that none of these territorial or municipal people or organizations are supposed to be operating this way. They have no authority to operate this way.
They don't know how to operate.
Right.
Every one of them, none of them know how to operate. They don't even know about the 3 jurisdictions. They don't know any of this that Ann is talking about. They're all compartmentalized legal idiots now because they've all been trained through the same kindergarten through 12th grade. And that's the reason our government took over the Department of Education, is to standardize.
Right.
To put everybody into a slavery position, including those county commissioners that run it.
Right. These people are complete. They don't know this history. They weren't taught this history any more than we were. They're totally clueless. I talk to them every day. I've been talking to them every day for 30 years. And it's up to us to educate each other and educate them and bring them along and to bring to their attention 2 very important facts. We're not under their jurisdiction. They're under our jurisdiction. And as far as the territorial government goes, we are owed the law of peace. And as far as the municipal government goes, we're not members of any religious cult. Okay? Now we got a couple things here I just want to wrap up before I give the chief some breathing space here. You see back here in back of me? Right there? That wonderful old flag? That's our peace flag.
Lies on my house.
Mine
too. Mine 3.
You have probably, if you're an average American, you have never seen that flag in your life.
Where do you buy them on Anna's site?
Yeah, you can buy them on my site. They're getting so popular that we're seeing them begin to pop up in retail locations.
Really?
Really? Yeah.
So I want you to notice something about the civil peace flag. The bars run vertically, right? They aren't horizontal like the war flag. Old Glory is our war flag. That's when we go to war. And we allow our British territorial subcontractors to use our war flag because guess what? The Navy, okay, and the Marines. But this one has vertical stripes. You know what those vertical stripes mean? They mean we're open for business. It means we're at peace. Everybody can come here. You can do business. You don't have to worry about us jumping on you. Okay? It's like a floodgate. It's like the gates in a dam. We're connecting to the rest of the world. Our trade is free flowing. We're not at war. We're not separated from anyone or anything anymore because we're at peace. This is our peace flag. And guess what? We were declared at peace officially by President Andrew Johnson. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I went to school, U.S. history was an absolutely lousy class. It was taught by the most boring teacher possible. It did not go into depth about anything. And President Andrew Johnson always got a stab in the back and a kick in the butt, although it wasn't really made clear why. Well, it turns out that President Andrew Johnson declared us at peace 3 times in public, creating a binding contract on the territorial and municipal governments to leave us at peace, to understand that we are at peace. Our government, the government of the people, by the people, for the people, is at peace. And to this very day, the military government respects that if you tell them who you are, and if you tell them your status. And they are bound to treat us under, guess what? The law of peace. There's an entire pamphlet that is distributed by the Army. It's called AR 27-161-1, is it? But it's a pamphlet that's issued by the U.S. Army, and it details exactly what the law of peace is. And we are owed it because of Andrew Johnson, who has to be one of the bravest men that ever lived. Because after all, they had just killed Lincoln. And he still went ahead and did it. He declared us at peace, and that's our peace flag right there from that moment onward.
What year was that up for?
It was over a couple of years. He declared it 3 times, and you can find the exact dates and stuff in my book. If you know something's wrong, when.
What was that pamphlet number again? AR?
It's AR 27-161-1, I think.
Should you fly that flag, you'll find the neighbors especially who fly on your house will question its validity. And the interesting reference that you can give them is to go back and read a novel called The Scarlet Letter. I don't know how many of you have read it in school. Nathaniel Hawthorne from the early 1800s, clearly before the Civil War. And on page 3, there is an exact description of that flag as the flag that flew on the Customs House, because that is the Customs flag was the earlier name for it, because that's how you knew they weren't the military. They were the customs people, and they were open for business.
Right. And so the war flag has horizontal stripes because guess what? We're barring people. We have a bar against someone. We've declared war on someone. That's why we're flying a war flag. Now, have we, the people, declared any wars? We haven't declared a war since 1812.
Let me ask about the amount of stars versus the amount of stars back in the galaxies.
The civil government continues, our civil government. See, there's their civil government and there's our civil government. The United States of America has a civil government too. Okay? Their civil government flies a flag that is very distinctive. It's a white flag with 3 red stars. The municipal civil government flag is different.
If you put the Coast Guard logo right in the middle of that flag, that's their flag, the Coast Guard flag.
In colors.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, the Coast Guard is supposed to protect us.
that's right.
They're supposed to be our domestic guardians for the perimeter of our coastline,
They're a
right?
civil organization to protect it.
What's that Coast Guard vessel doing in the Black Sea then?
Good question. It's because it's another one of the usurpations against our lawful government. They subsumed the Coast Guard under the Navy, And now we have the Brits, or as you've seen, through the Brits, the Pope, in charge of our Coast Guard as well as our Navy on the high seas. So, as all of you have figured out by now, I think, the two sides of the church are like two faces, right? You got the holy, the sacred, and you have the profane, right? So the church has been used as a storefront to cover up for a whole lot of dirty dealing that's gone on in the background. And now what's happening? Well, you might have heard the Pope make the statement the other day that we all need to obey the United Nations. Sorry. No. Municipal citizens may need to obey the United Nations. Maybe even British territorial citizens need to obey the United Nations. We have no such agreement. And furthermore, we have to distinguish which UN he's talking about. Because the UN is very different from the United Nations organization. The UN corporation was formed by Vichy French Nazi sympathizers 2 years before the end of the war. So the UN is not the United Nations organization we think of. It's a for-profit, mercenary organization that is one of the filthiest, most violent, most vile, sneakiest, most depraved organizations on earth. So no, we don't have to obey the UN. We shouldn't obey the UN. And if we value our lives, we're not going to obey the UN corporation for nothing, ever. So do make that distinction too between the UN Corp and the United Nations organization. Because if they get away with this, we're going to be literally enslaved. Our land will be taken. We will have no defense. And we won't even be able to fight it in court. They'll just roll it all up into a big ball of wax and they will control everything. And who's they? The bankers. Now, the Committee of 300 is a separate whole business. They have relationship to the bankers, for sure, you know, but it's a different structure within all this mess. And I don't really want to go into that because I'd like the chief to come forward and give us a few words about the Continental Marshals. I want to give her a little introduction here. The history of this is that in May of 2015, I called a conference in Anchorage. And I basically invited people that were active at that point doing different kinds of things to help organize our state governments and to get people into their proper political status and to defend against all of these claims of abandonment and other things that were going on. And while we were there were a lot of formal discussions like this, and then there were a lot of little committee meetings and that sort of thing going on too. And basically we formed the Continental Marshals Service and commissioned it And Bruce Doucette, who later went off track and got in trouble by transgressing against a territorial court, was given the task of organizing the Continental Marshals Program. He was not having a whole lot of time and skill and attention to do that, so he handed it off to this lady. She not only understood the jurisdictions, she had the drive and the determination, the sheer will to, with nothing, not even the paperwork. He didn't even hand over the paperwork to her. She was elected via teleconferencing and left with nothing. Just an assignment. Here you are. Build the Continental Marshal Service. And she did. So, Chief Haywood.
Hello, everyone. Hello. I have not really spoken to enough people. I have been on ITV through Laos. I have been in radio shows. I had my own TV show for a while and would speak to people about the Continental Marshal Service. As Anna said, in 2015, I was selected, elected, and voted 3 different times into this office. I was given no direction, no vision, anything. So this all for about 1.5 years, I completely and totally worked on my own. And then I started getting like-minded people to come in and share my vision and my passion for this service. Now, I'm 50 years old. So some people think, oh, why is a woman, a Native American woman, taking over such a task? I come from a family of veterans, people. My dad was in the Korean War. My grandfathers, everybody were in the military. So I was raised in a military family. He was also a land surveyor, so I know about maps. I was his drafter. And then I worked for the federal government, for the Department of Labor. I was a confidential secretary. Then I went out and did other things. Went to school for forensic science, psychology profiling. You name it, I've done it. So, but my vision was for this service because I kept seeing my people, the Native American people, the sovereign nations, being literally destroyed and genocide. That's what, and I know we can't use bad language, but that's what ticked me off to begin with. And then I started seeing corrupt politicians, corrupt police officers, policy officers, corrupt sheriffs, governors, and other people in power using that power to hurt the people, the weaker, the people. And I said, you know what? That's my vision and my passion. So I sat down one day after given this task, and I said, what can I do for the world, not just America, but for the world, to make a difference? And what am I ready to sacrifice or give up in order to do this? So I prayed about it because I'm a very spiritual person. And I said, you know, I would give my life for this because many died for me. Now I'm willing to die for others. So I started with, as Anna said, nothing, just a name. Continental Marshal Service, just a name, that's all it was. And to date, I have, and I ordered it through the military system, S1, S2, S3. We have 10 codes that we check in on a Zello app to make sure everybody's okay. And if you're not, then we'll be able to tell so other marshals can get to us or whatever. But I wanted to share with you what was done in the last couple of years so that you'll know that I took this very seriously. Starting from S1 on down, we have a national, which is international, secretary. We have an officer of operations, an officer of logistics, security, head of security, civil affairs, purchasing, logistics, finance, marketing and PR, internal affairs, external investigations, border patrol, coastal patrol, militia committees, military committees, and law enforcement committees. I'm also a liaison through the National Sheriff's Association, a member of the Peacekeepers Association, so I can interface with de facto, okay? And I did that so that they could be educated and know that they're doing wrong, that they're not upholding to their oaths. Now, a regular policy officer usually doesn't have to really take an oath. They're not elected, they're just, it's a foreign private contract corporation that the state or the county said, okay, we need policy officers, we need police officers. So they're really just, they're not elected by the people. The only law enforcement that in a state or in a county that is elected is a sheriff, a county sheriff, and a continental marshal. So the reason why I did that is so that I could educate them to make sure that they were on the right page and they were holding to their oath and to the Constitution. Just like Anna said, state nationals, state citizens, we the people are not subject to the constitutions. We are only there to uphold those constitutions and make the public officials and the United States citizens and the federal employees, state employees accountable for their contract. That is a contract made from we the people to these government officials and these public officers. Another thing that the service, Continental Marshal Service, is going to be doing, and I talked to David about this, is we do accords. Okay, what we did is we sat down and took us a year and we compiled an articles of association, a private association, so that we are different from anybody else out in the world right now. Anybody can go out and say, okay, I want to start a security company. I want to go out, like in Georgia, for instance, there is Muskogee County Marshals. They're not U.S. Marshals. They're not police officers. But they just started this organization and they start going around in police cars and arresting people. Okay, what authority? Who gave you that authority? So you've got all these different branches of people now that are coming out and just starting these organizations and collecting revenue from the people. They are literally defrauding the people mentally and through their pockets. So an accord is an official agreement or treaty. And I have been in talks with a lot of sovereign nations, tribal nations, that have been in the process with help of many people of getting their sovereign governments up, okay? And instead of having tribal police like they used to do, okay, they wanted more authority and more jurisdictional group of people to handle their peacekeeping enforcement. So they want to accord or have a treaty or a private contract with the Continental Marshals, which is a very big step. I don't know if any of y'all know, But in order to sit down and have a meeting with a chief or a travel leader is near to impossible. You have to be vetted in, you have to be of righteous, spiritual nature to even get near them, literally. I have one on speed dial. I had a Zoom conference with a chief of a tribe and his wife, who is an elder leader, and a guy that used to be, believe it or not, the president of Bank of America. And he saw the corruption and got tired of everything, so when it came to retiring, he went back to his roots and to his native land. So they have their own banks, they have everything going, and we've got a lot of group of people that are going out and not just hitting one sovereign nation or one tribe. We're reaching out to every tribal nation, okay? Because in reality, before the founding fathers got here, the genocide was on them, okay? The land and the soil belonged to them, and it was stolen, pillaged, piracy, everything that our service stands against. That's what was done to these people. So we will be helping them and giving them our assistance. And how that goes is they send us a request for proposal. We send our proposal back, which is in alignment with our Articles of Association. And then if we can come to an agreement on a treaty, then we go forward. The only other thing I want to read is to let everybody know that the Continental Marshal Service on all of our documents says unincorporated and non-statutory. We have our own seals, we have our own logos, everything. The first thing that comes in our preamble to our Articles of Association is we come in peace, we do no harm. Okay, even though everybody knows that with special operations, if we're going after a child trafficker or human trafficker or pedophiles, we might not be so nice, but that's just part of it. The only thing that I want to do next, if I can, lastly, is read a part of my oath of office, which my oath of office is in 2 counties, one being Lamar County in Georgia, which is a constitutional de jure court. It's with the Secretary of State in Georgia. It got the gold seal of 1776 from the governor of Georgia. It then went to the Secretary of State in Washington, D.C. A copy went to the White House, and there's a copy in the Library of Congress. Now, I don't know how many sheriffs can say that. Not many. I don't know how many police officers can say that. None. I don't know how many FBI agents can say that. None. But one of the main things that is in the paragraph, one paragraph specifically in our oath is, I do protect, shield, and defend the land, patents, estates, and property rights of individual inheritances, and those granted to them at birth from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, knowing that property includes one's freedoms, liberties, pursuits, and that privacy of all papers, private and public, rises to include the free, unencumbered, and unobstructed access to clean water, air, food, and energy. Okay? So we take our oath very, very, very seriously. Anybody that has taken the oath of office to be a Continental Marshal for this service. And I've talked to a lot of people here that have come today, and I've started a list. And if you're wanting to be considered part of the Continental Marshal Service, This is different than it was 4 years ago. We have a very in-depth process because we don't want to turn into what de facto is, which is corrupt. Okay, you've got a lot of bullies. You've got a lot of trigger-happy people that are running around. So we have a very strict process. I'm not saying it's not long, but we do have a very in-depth vetting process. Then that goes to after you get approved through the vetting process and your resume, then you get an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. So you can't just go and tell internal business to anybody. Then you get your oath pack, then you get accepted into the association. And just like David and everybody said, the biggest thing that we have that we require or demand is that you correct your status. You cannot, even in drill assemblies, in the de jure, you cannot be a United States citizen and be in an assembly. You can't. You're crossing two lines. So you cannot be a continental marshal and be a U.S. citizen. You have to correct your status, and we have that process as well. But you have to correct your status in order to be a continental marshal, because we want our standing, our status, and everything we do to be lawful. And I will tell you, since doing this in the 4 years and almost 5 years that I've had it, you can talk to almost any FBI agent, tell them, ask them my name or say my name, and they'll say, no, we know her. If you're part of that, you're okay. Because we know her. I'm not afraid to go out and talk to any and everybody, and I have. I've sent documents to the FBI, GBI, DAs, judges. It doesn't matter who they are. I've put myself out there. Some say, well, you're putting yourself out there as a target. No, I have a vision and a passion for this. And if I don't put myself out there like that, then where are we going to be? We're going to be where we were 15, 20 years ago and not have what we need to have in place right now. And that is a good peacekeeping association that can protect and serve the people.
Here, here.
Thank you, Chief Haywood, Senior Chief Haywood. This has been a long, long process. A lot of sacrifice, a lot of misunderstanding, threats, losses. It's been very hard. Many people have suffered. Many people have gone without. Nobody's given me a paycheck in 30 years. Okay, so this is a passion that Chief Haywood brings to this work, and it's only because of her that we have a growing, vibrant, well-regulated, well-conceived Continental Marshal Service. And this is our first line of defense in the international venue of the law. This is what stands between us and human trafficking, unlawful conversion, interstate bank fraud, piracy, all these issues that take place in that interface between land and sea. That's where the Continental Marshals stand. And then closer to home, we have our county sheriffs. More and more of them are beginning to understand what's gone on in this country, what it means to be a peacekeeper as opposed to being a law enforcement officer. And more law enforcement officers are now understanding their role and how they can choose And this is at their discretion, because remember, they're acting in a private policy position, how they can also, under the determinations of Mack and Prinz, that's Mack as in Sheriff Richard Mack, and Prinz, P-R-I-N-Z, versus USA Inc., they can also choose to enforce the Constitution. So this is an education process. Most of the men that we have serving as police officers are not bad men. There's some rotten apples, but most of them are good Americans. They're people who consider themselves Americans, who want the best for this country and for their community. So they need to be educated, just as we're doing our bit to educate everyone here today. They need to realize that even if they're working in a private law enforcement capacity, they still have a public calling to enforce the constitutions and the public law and to protect the people of this country. Because after all, it's their friends, their families. We're all part of it. We're all part of each other. We're all part of our communities and our state. And so instead of looking at this as a us versus them, look at it as a us with us. And rise up to the challenge of educating yourselves, taking action, supporting the efforts of others that you see, like the Continental Marshals Program, our living law firm, Dave Street, Ron Gibbs. Nobody's paying us to do this. We're doing this because we love America. We love what America stands for. So, everybody, remember how we started out this morning? We were talking about how Abraham is called a friend of God. And the kind of friendship was described as the Hebrew word rachem. Friendship in which the feeling is so deep and the friendship is so deep that you would give up your life for your friend. We need to have that in America today. And while I'm on it, I want to make another thing very clear. Just one more thing. We started out with the definition of people as being the people of the soil and the people of the land, right? The word people is Hebrew for militia. So we the people means we the militia. There's been an effort to demonize militia, and I want you to know that when you sign up as a member of your state assembly, you automatically become a juror. You automatically become a member of the militia if you're in that age group. And you automatically inherit the rights, responsibilities, and guarantees that Americans are owed. So don't be afraid of the militia. We are the militia. And don't be afraid of arms or guns, so long as they are in the hands of responsible, well-trained people. And most of all, I want to end as I began, with my t-shirt. Here we go. Fear not. Fear not, because I'm with you. That's direct from God and me.